Maybe I'm overly influenced by American movies, but at a distance, you get the impression that in the United States there has been and maybe still is a tradition of the crusading lawyer, the anti-corruption for the people crusading lawyer. And I'm thinking about somebody, say, like Bobby Kennedy Jr., who was on our stage last year, the year before, or I don't know, maybe Eliot Spitzer is that kind of a guy these days. The legal profession in Canada seems to be more oriented to serving corporate interests, and the people go into it are often interested in the money. In the case of Alan Young, we have a different kind of lawyer, and Alan Young argues that our criminal justice system wastes billions of dollars every year, time and money, in ferreting out criminals, and he puts that in quotation marks, engaged in consensual but controversial lifestyle choices, such as alternative sex practices or recreational drug use. He says these exercises in moral hygiene leave officials weary and ill-equipped to deal with the serious issues of violence or exploitation, which really should be the focus of their efforts. He's not a man to mince words. He says, instead, thousands of bullshit cases clog up the system and diminish the majesty of the law. He's a humane guy. He's funny. He's an uncommon voice against the arbitrary rule of the state wielding archaic and intrusive law. This is Alan Young.
Thank you. Thank you very much. First of all, I must say I'm really honored to be here. This is my first time here. I just got to get a few things out of my briefcase. This is a wonderfully, sorry, I'm showing you my ass. Wonderfully unique event. I've never attended something like this in my life, and it's sort of an affirmation for me of the work I do to be invited to this. I do have a couple of bones of contention. Moses characterized this as a mini vacation for the brain. Come on. I was so overstimulated last night from these conversations. Hey, this is the mini vacation from the brain, okay? The other bone of contention I have is being asked to actually speak about pot. When I got an email that Moses wanted to speak with me about this conference, I was very, very excited. And when I got on the phone with him, and he started talking, I was saying, please don't ask me to talk about pot. Please don't ask me to talk about pot. I wanted to talk about wrongful convictions, victimization of innocent victims in our criminal process, the horrible violence against prostitutes in our society. I wanted to talk about something that people consider serious. All the conversations you just had and all the discussions were very compelling. Pot is my issue. I've worked on it for 25 years. But I have to tell you something. It's an uphill battle. It's an uphill battle for two reasons. First of all, political figures, trying to deal with them on the drug issue, they don't see it as a mini vacation. They see it as a vacation from hell. Absolute prohibition. Don't talk to me about the value of intoxication, they say. They don't want to hear it. They use thought-terminating cliches. Just say no. Nancy Reagan invented. What does that mean, just say no? It means let's not think about it. So it's been very frustrating because I can't convince people in authority because they don't want to listen. What about people like you, members of the public? Well, you do think about it quite a bit. But ultimately, when push comes to shove, when it comes to the pot issue, the pursuit of oblivion, you see it as a trivial pursuit. Really. Not worthy of legal protection. Oh my God, Alan Young has wasted 25 years protecting people's right to smoke pot. Why isn't he doing something serious? He's the Cheech and Chong lawyer, right? And it annoys me immensely, but I do understand where it comes from. But here's what annoys me about it. There's a real hypocrisy that goes on in this country and every country. Trivial pursuit, right? How come there's 3 million people engaged in this trivial pursuit? I don't think it's trivial if that many Canadians engage in a hobby. More Canadians smoke pot than play hockey, okay? I don't know how trivial it is considering that we had millions of people watching the Stanley Cup. How about millions of people supporting the 3 million people who choose to smoke pot? So I don't know how trivial it is, but this is a problem in the area I work with. Vice crimes, pursuit of hedonistic activities. We're really hypocritical about it. T.S. Eliot said, we maintain the dignity of disapproval and the pleasure of indulgence. at the same time, okay? Porn is a way better example than pot, actually. The porn industry right now makes net $7 billion a year in North America, but nobody talks about it. Nobody shows up at work Monday morning, oh my God, you gotta rent International Dick of Mystery, it's the best movie I've ever seen, okay? But many people are watching the movie, we just don't want to talk about it. So Moses asked me to speak about pot. I've got to follow such compelling stories. And I guess my goal in the 15 minutes or so allotted to me is to try to convince you why you should care about the pot issue, why it's important, even though you may not smoke pot, even though you may think it's stupid. The reason you should care is because the pot issue is about the failure of democracy. As simple as that. And I'll explain what I mean. This goes way back to my childhood. And I want to tell you a goofy anecdote sort of to show you where I came from. Basically, I do believe there is an instinctive drive to intoxication. I'm not going to pursue that here. I recommend you read Dr. Robert Siegel's book called Intoxication, where he describes animals getting high. Animals party way more than humans. But you know there's an instinctive drive. Before I came down here today, my little boy, who's 2 years old, comes into my room and says, music, music. He loves music. So I put on the button, and what does he start to do as soon as the music comes on? Spin. Why do children spin like that? Well, come on, they want to get dizzy. It's the only way they can alter their consciousness, okay? Then maybe when you're 13, you start doing other things like hyperventilating. I don't know if that's, people still do that in junior high, but we used to get together and have hyperventilation parties. Pretty strange. I think there is this instinctive drive. Now, when I was 13 years old, I started reading a lot of sort of the countercultural revolutionary rant of Abbie Hoffman and Jerry Rubin. I do believe that sometimes the character you believe you built is just a matter of accident. And for me, it's the confluence of two things at once. A banana and Abbie Hoffman steal this book. It was the weekend, I just bought the book. My parents decided to go away for the afternoon. I'm reading the book, and there is Abbie Hoffman saying, here's a legal way to get high. And at 13, I couldn't access illegal drugs. That's a good thing. But I wanted to get high. I wanted to spin like the adults. So what he suggested was, you take the banana. Oh, great. You know, I've never been able to open bananas properly. And you scrape off this junk, which I know has a technical name, the white stuff here on the peel. I don't know if you people remember this, but I know you all know Mellow Yellow, the song by Donovan. Think of the words, electrical banana, going to be a sudden rage. Yeah, hopefully that's not metaphoric. So, you take the banana peel, you heat it up, and you smoke it. So my parents were gone. We had a basement kitchen. So I went down there, scraped the banana, put it in tinfoil, put it in the oven, heated it up. Waited about a half hour, rolled this elephant-sized joint. I didn't know what I was doing. Tried to light it. It was too moist. For 5 minutes, I was trying to light it. Nothing was happening. Doorbell rings. I'm freaking out. Who's here now? The FBI, you know? I was reading Abbie Hoffman, right? It's my Uncle Rusty, very gentle soul who I love. So I spent a couple hours with him, but I left my elephant-sized joint in the basement there. Of course, because I spent so much time with Rusty, my parents show up, and for some reason, my mom goes right to the basement. I'm busted! She finds the joint. She confronts me a few hours later. Alan, are you smoking marijuana? I couldn't tell her I was smoking a banana. It was embarrassing. I mean, I was actually more concerned that she would think I was mentally disordered and have to commit me. I was prepared to take all the youthful indiscretion of trying drugs and all that. But what happens is, my mother does the only responsible thing she knows what to do. She starts clipping out of every magazine and every newspaper, every horror story about drugs that were coming out, okay? And give it to me every time at dinner. Did you read this, Alan? Do you understand this? She didn't know what happened was, I found these stories so outlandish that at the age of 14, I taught myself how to do research in the library, and even at the university I went, because I wanted to read the original text of some of these things. And I admit, I didn't understand a lot of it. But I was able to see that what was represented in the media and what the government was saying was not supported by the science. And that's what made me embark upon this career later on. If it wasn't for this banana and Abbie Hoffman, I'd probably be an accountant. Now, What did I discover? And I don't want to get into scientific detail now because I'm not a scientist, but what are the harms related to cannabis? Very few. It is not for everybody. Let's be real. Alcohol's not for everybody. There are some people who should not smoke marijuana, period. They're going to have a bad reaction. But for the majority of people, the worst harm is really bronchial impairment. No lung cancer. I don't know if you noticed, 3 weeks ago, definitive studies from California. We've known this for a while, but it took a while till it was reported. No lung cancer. Bronchial impairment is the worst. This is not a scientific observation, but probably the other harm of marijuana is it leads to, for some people, and I'm very much in the pot culture, to a very boring monomania. Everything's pot. They see a banana or an apple. Oh, I can carve a bong out of that, right? Let me show you an example. Do you have the picture from Cannabis Culture, the magazine? No, I have a picture to set up from the cover of Cannabis. There. No, the other one, please. We'll get to that in a sec. Okay. No, thank you very much, but that's not the one I want. What I wanted to show you. Yeah, there we are. This is a very excellent magazine published by Mark Emery, a wonderful man who we got to fight to keep in Canada. The U.S. wants to extradite. But, yeah, I'm sorry, Michelle. And Michelle, too. I'm very sorry, yeah. And all I want to point out is at the top, Pot and Popeye. What's he tooting in his pipe? Come on. I love Popeye. I grew up with Popeye. Popeye was eating spinach. There is absolutely no references to marijuana, yet a pothead can look at the Popeye cartoons and figure out it must be pot. In the same way at high school, we had a buddy, Larry, who never spoke about anything but pot. It got very tiresome. One day at lunch, he writes a little note, slides it over to us. Oh my God, it doesn't say something about pot. It says, Ecoms EPOD. We're looking at, Larry, what are you trying to say other than I love pot? He said, no, that's smoke dope backwards. So that's the harm I see. But you know what? And you don't have to believe me, check it out yourself. But the state misrepresents entirely what this debate's about. Show me the other one, the one that was on before with the police. How do you like this? Police Association magazine, protecting the protectors. It's like they're going into a nuclear holocaust zone for plants. I've been in hundreds of grow rooms. Marijuana is not a dangerous plant. This is not science, this is science fiction. Because only in a world of science fiction can a plant take on predatory characteristics like this. Okay? Why is the state doing this? Why are they lying to you, which is the failure in democratic theory? I don't know. I've been trying to figure that out for a long time. Do they really believe it's because of the ill health effects that I say don't exist, but they believe that? I don't think so. Think about it. When have we used criminal law to protect our health? Hey? Mr. Christie and Colonel Sanders will be criminal number one. Right? They're trans fat. The GI disorders are way more harmful than anything about marijuana. We don't use marijuana to encourage our criminal law to encourage good health. But even if we thought it was very risky, we never prohibit an activity based on risk alone. Risk that we tolerate is based on an assessment of the risk and the social utility of the activity. Okay, you've got to balance them. Cars, weapon of mass destruction. Come on, it is. But the social utility in our mobility and transportation, we tolerate it, we approve it, we promote it. Okay? Toilets. American statistics show 40,000 Americans injure themselves on their toilets every year. I'm sure Canadians do too. I try to figure out, are they falling in? Are they sitting, is the seat going on their private parts, which happened in McDonald's. McDonald's was sued for that. The point is, nobody's demonized Sir Thomas Crapper for inventing the flush toilet. No one's saying we need an alternative to flush toilets because there's social utility in a flush toilet. When it comes to marijuana, all we do is look at the supposed risks, the harms. We never balance off the value of intoxication because the government doesn't believe, other than alcohol, there's any value in intoxication. We don't recognize it as an instinctive drive. It's a trivial pursuit. Now, the fact is, there is value in it, and I don't want to debate that, but here's what the government sort of looks at it. They say, okay, intoxication other than alcohol is alteration of consciousness, right? Alteration of consciousness will always lead to critical thinking. When you see your reality differently, you start to think differently. That's a natural product. And critical thinking invariably leads to questioning authority. And that summarizes the 5 years of the 60s. And that's what we associate all illicit drugs with, countercultural dropout. What was Timothy Leary's mantra? I can't remember. Tune in, turn on, drop out. That's why governments are afraid, not because they think it's going to hurt your immune system or your endocrine system. They don't want you questioning authority. That's why I say marijuana, the prohibition, is about thought control. And that's why I say it's contrary to democratic ideals. The whole issue is about tyranny. Now, if you don't buy my sort of idea of thought control, look at this about democratic theory. How does the government explain that since 1975, 70% of Canadians have wanted the criminal law removed from marijuana possession? I thought we live in a democracy. I thought there's electoral accountability. How can that happen? Even more ridiculous. Governments across the world keep appointing royal commissions. We've had 3 of them. Well, 1 and 2 minor committee reports. And they all end up with the same conclusion. Only the French resisted this, but everybody said the same thing. The harms associated with marijuana use do not warrant the criminal sanction. Why do we spend $10 million on a royal commission, take the recommendations, and put it in a library for academics like me to read? That's not what the design is. The design is to change the law. Thirdly, you may or may not know this, Canada and the US are out of step with everybody on this. Almost all of Europe is decriminalized in one form or another, and so is Australia. Our politicians are aware of public opinion. They're aware of the international developments. So they constantly promise us change, and you know we've just been through 3 years of being promised change. What happened? I don't know. Now, I don't want to cause any problems for Professor Kotler, but you may want to ask him, since he was in power at the time that this bill died. It's a discussion he could have. I can't. I don't know what happened with Parliament. That's why I say the issue should be important to all of you. Because when you have governments that aren't responsive to the electorate, to what we want, that's a failure of democracy. Now, when you have a war on drugs, which is what we have, there's going to be other casualties too, other than democratic theory and corruption. There's 2 horrible casualties of this war on drugs. I just want to talk about them very briefly. This is an amazing plant, okay? I don't want to overstate it, but it's an amazing plant. It has intoxicant value, it has industrial value, it has medical value. Not a lot of plants like that. Well, because we prohibited cannabis in a hysterical way, industrial hemp just went into the garbage. And I can tell you one thing, and I don't know a lot about this, but 1938, US Department of Agriculture confirms 1 acre of hemp will give you as much paper product as 4 acres of clear cut. Why we're not looking at hemp, I don't know. They've also created biomass fuels for cars out of hemp seed oil. But this is all being forgotten or obscured because of the prohibition. More sadly than the industrial side is something Barbara Turnbull had mentioned, the medical side. This is actually almost pathetic. Cannabis has been used for close to 4,000 years. It first appeared in 2700 in the Chinese Pharmacopoeia. It has so many diverse applications, it's unbelievable. Antiemetic, antispasmodic, anti-inflammatory, appetite stimulant, which sounds like just the munchies, but when you're on chemotherapy, that's really important. How about in 2004 and 5? How many people saw newspaper stories which showed that the Spanish and Israeli research scientists have shown that cannabinoid derivatives are shrinking tumors? You didn't see it, did you? Yeah, it's about page 830, a little blurb. Because politics is obscuring the medical value. Governments don't want to recognize the medical value of marijuana, though it can alleviate sufferings in tens or hundreds of thousands of people. Look at the US. The FDA, last month I think it was, I lost track, they said no medical value in marijuana, despite an enormous amount of scientific evidence that's mounted. This is politics disguised as science. Politicians have recruited scientists to be tools of propaganda. There is no moral neutrality in science. We've had a lot of discussions here about technology, it's all interesting, but it's not morally neutral. Ever since Einstein and Oppenheimer got into their gig, we know it's not morally neutral, okay? So even in Canada, which we're a little more progressive on the issue, we still hide behind this false science. Now in Canada, because of some court cases I was involved in, some other people, we've compelled this government to create a medical program where thousands of people, well, about 1,500 I think right now, have been authorized to grow marijuana, buy marijuana from the government, or get someone to grow it for them. It's not a bad program. It has some flaws, they're working on it. But the reality is Health Canada won't take the next step and try to normalize marijuana as medicine because they say, sorry, there isn't enough clinical research to show it's medically valuable. Why isn't there medical research? Because the prohibition has prevented that research. The only way you could get money in the 60s and 70s with marijuana was if you said, I want to overdose a lab rat to show leukemia. Oh, here's $1 million to do it. You look at what NIDA spent, because we didn't spend a lot of money in Canada. We let the Americans do the research. If you said, I want $100,000 to show the anti-inflammatory properties of cannabis, goodbye, we're not interested in that. So the government's put us in a difficult position where we know this is helping, but we don't know why. Now, the good news is, Big Pharma has discovered that cannabinoid medicines will have what's called blockbuster status, billion-dollar sales. They're all scurrying now to do the research. And they're going to develop amazing products as a result. And I just want to say as an aside, Moses and I are involved with a company called Canisat, which is the first publicly traded company in Canada dedicated to scientific research and clinical development of cannabinoid products. Now, the sad thing about it is, but this is a pretty trite observation, shows money makes the world go round. No one cared about the medical value of marijuana until we saw that there could be money involved, but I don't care. If there's hundreds of thousands of people who use marijuana as medicine, and that's what the Canadian Medical Association says, I say, I don't care what the motivation is, let's help those people. And in terms of changing the criminal status of marijuana, it's all going to be about money also. Has anyone ever really sat to think why we have so many casinos in Canada? Well, here's what happened. Winter Olympics, the feds ran out of money. They went to the provinces, said, we want money, $100 million for the Olympics. Provinces said, great, we'll do it. The deal is you amend the criminal code to give us exclusive authority to run gaming schemes. And they amended the criminal code, and that was the birth of gambling. If that's what you call democracy, we live in different countries, and that's the problem with this issue of marijuana. It's a failure of democratic ideals, and I hope you all care, and I hope we get it back on the legislative agenda, do some good things for Canadians. Thank you.